Thank you very much, Eva, and thanks for all of you, for those who traveled and for those who take the time for this sunny day to spend the day speaking with us here. Before speaking about the trip to Wamba, I will just want to give a very short presentation of the situation of restitution in Congo, mainly because when we speak about restitution, Congo is always considered as mauvais élève, like the bad child of restitution. Why? Because I think some interpretation of things that happen and some partly done research, and of course it also comforts a lot of people to give that statement. Of course, because there was something that was considered as a restitution in the 70s. More than 1,000 objects came back to Congo from Belgium, and they always say that those objects disappeared. Recently, a museum was built in Kinshasa, of course not by European cooperation, but the South Korean cooperation. It's a 2 million fund project. And in that museum that I had the chance to visit in my trip to Kinshasa, you can see a ndop. A ndop is a Kuba kingdom sculpture. And when I was reading a book by a friend of mine, Sarah Van Burden, I could see that this ndop might be one of these objects that has been sent back by the Belgian. And it's one of the most precious objects that has been sent, and it's still there on display in the museum in Kinshasa. And very few people speak about that. I think there's kind of this very easy going to say, okay, we cannot restitute because during Mbuti regime, we sent back the object, and the object was found in the art market, and we took them back to Tervuren. Why was that possible? It was possible because the restitution at that time was giving the access to the object in the Congolese collection without giving the legal rights, the legal ownership of them. So the restitution was sending the object back, but the object was still owned by the Belgian state. So they could, if they found it in the art market, take it back, because they was theirs still. I will not do the full assessment of that, but just to jump onto today, when there's a law in preparation in Belgium, when instead of sending back the object without the ownership, they want to give the ownership without the object. So the law that is now currently in preparation in Belgium wants to give the Congolese state the ownership of objects that are considered to have been stolen, but they will still be kept in Belgium in a safe colonial museum. So that's the level of, I will say, the situation where we are dealing with now in Congo. And we are all aware of that. They know that we know, but the power imbalance is still a problem. I will jump to the question of the human remains. So this law doesn't touch the question of human remains. This law only touches the question of objects, ethnographic so-called objects. And it doesn't even, it's also limited in time, so they define what is the time when stealing is a problem, and what is the time, and everything before and after that are not considered by this law. So I don't know exactly the time frame, but it puts away a lot of interesting, like the most important human remains that we have is the skull of a chief named Lusinga, who was beheaded in 1893, so before the foundation of the Congo Free State. So this head and all the objects that was taken with these heads, a lot of objects that are now currently on display in the museum in Tervuren are not part of that. So when we speak about denial, the human remains are a big denial in the history of the restitution between Congo and mainly Belgium. And when we check the collections list, you will never find any assessment of that. So it just very recently, I think 2 years ago, that finally some list has been issued, some list has been given access to people, and we discovered that in the two museums that are working together, so the Royal Museum of Central Africa and the Natural History Museum, only in those two institutions, we have up to 650 human remains, 650 persons whose remains are still kept secretly in those institutions, public institutions. And the files, none of the Congolese historians have access to them until now. Recently, the Museum of Lubumbashi received two requests of restitution of human remains. The first request came from the University of Geneva that I'll be talking about. And the second one came from the ULB, the Free University of Belgium, the French-speaking one, to take the responsibility of that human remains. And if you look at why those universities contacted directly the university, if you look at the case of the Swiss university, for instance, you see that it was part of a long process of negotiation. I've been in touch with some museum director in Congo, and he told us that he was the first one to be contacted for this restitution. And he said, okay, we can take those human remains, but we will bury them in dignity. And I don't really understand which part of that sentence was a problem for them, because they said this is not what we want, and we look for another institution to do that. So they prefer working with the university because I imagine, it's my presumption and I assume it, they can continue operating with those human remains on the basics of a scientific value of those remains. And so that example was duplicated by the Free University of Belgium. When I have access to this story, I thought it's something that we should do something about. And I contacted my friends from the group 50/50, and we developed this project, The Ghosts Are Returning, as a way to address this question of the presence of 7 skeletons in the laboratory of the University of Geneva. And from the first collaboration that we did, we imagined that it could be very interesting to work with music and theater as tools to address how we can commemorate, how we can celebrate those 7 people. There's something very special about them, this collection. So when I speak about the 650 human remains in Belgium, we only have, as far as I know, 6 names attached to them. So most of them has no name, probably because there was no interest of naming, because naming is also giving human identity to them. Like, its first step of dehumanizing was to erase those names. While in the Swiss collection, Ngowe, Abelua, Bisati, Aneka, Besage, Ngala, and Avuo are named. The place of burial are vaguely described, and during our trip with Eva, Elia, and the other member of the group 50/50, we were able to find, through oral history and memory of the people there, some of the places, some of the villages where they were living. So they've been taken by a medical doctor named Boris Hade, who was living in Wamba, a small city in northeastern Congo. And they were Mbuti. And that's very particular. So Mbuti is what some ethnographers used to call pygmies, like a kind of encompassing name of all the people who are considered smaller than what they consider as an average, normal, average size of a human being. And this was also the reason why there was been a lot extensive research on them. So Boris Ade was researching to understand how we could explain this size. Probably, that's again my own assumption that I assume, probably in a way of trying to see them as a less évolué version of humanity. Now other scientists has been, and the genetics has broken all those nonsense, and it's very clear that we share the same humanity and the same DNA, but still those objects are conserved in those boxes you can see in the image there in the University of Geneva. So when we were there, one thing that touched me was in an evening that we spent in the village was the description of the lack of capacity of the so-called Bantu, like people with a taller size community, who cannot sing like them. And the polyphony of the Mbuti is one of the most elaborate music culture in the world. And this is not considered as pride, but it's considered something very normal for them. And most of those people who leave the community, they always come back to the community when they start to sing and dance. And that makes me think of this, when we speak a lot about separation, I want to point it out, another separation that is part of this. We spoke about the separation between human remains and artifacts and artworks. But there's also this separation between what the specialists of heritage call immaterial heritage and material heritage. And so we see that the music are on one side, the objects are on the other side, and the restitution, I think, when you look at those museums, they have so collected a lot of songs, tales, and so on, and how, even if they are considered to not having a value, it's very important to know that that as well has been taken, and especially in the process of the Christianization. So that's very important that we also consider that, and one of the ways to do that, it's not necessarily, I think, the same way that make an object living long term is to preserve it in a museum. But the best way to make a living culture survive is to make it dynamic, to change it, to reinterpret it. And the Group 50/50 project, the Ghosts Are Returning, the music project, when we invite Elia from Switzerland, Kojak, the guitarist from Kinshasa, the theater people, Collectif Dardar, Christiana Tabaro, and Michael Disanka. For us, it's also to reconnect with this part of the culture, this so-called immaterial, but that we can embody and make it alive, make it present physically in a space, make it shareable with an audience, make it understandable, make it bringing people sensitivity to that. So that's the challenge that we are in the process of doing, and the same way I share with Eva the direction of this symposium, we also share the dramaturgy, the playwright's role for that. And we hope that that will be our small stone in all this very complicated situation of the human remains coming from Congo. And there have been a moment when we were discussing that maybe it's very interesting to have Mwazulu here. And also there have been the moments when we are asked, like being professional is to get rid of any kind of activism. So you are a cultural professional, you shouldn't behave like activists. That's something that I've been told in Geneva University. I don't think that this separation is something that should guide our work. And I think our work is more about restoring humanity. Our work is about giving something to the next generation. And I don't think that this, again, separation between being a cultural professional and being an activist is something relevant at all at this stage. Thank you very much.